So we start with Parshat Rosh. Just some amazing things in this week's Parsha. You know, we're getting ready towards the time of year. Is it working? Okay. Rosh Hashanah is called, has many names to it. The head of the year, Judgment Day. It's the time of the day where God is analyzing, basically does a reaccounting. It's a count day, right? Audit day, where Hashem is evaluating all of creation. Thank God that we are privy to such a piece of knowledge that we can prepare ourselves. And it's also absolutely no accident that these parshas and every single parsha that leads up to the New Year, the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, also is gearing us towards that preparation of what we're supposed to be doing and what we're supposed to be focusing on. Okay? And this week's parsha is definitely one of them, and then it leads into the other parshas. Okay? Parshas Ki Seitzei, Shoftim. And a big part of it actually has to do with what we're going to talk about, which is called a koach, a force that resides within us, which is called two forces actually that reside within us. Okay? One is called, right, as Rav Nassan puts it, the spirit of man, and then there's the spirit of the animal. Okay? This is the language that Rav Nachman puts it, and also by Rav Nassan, who's his student. So first we start out with Ro'eh. And what does it say here, the beginning of Ro'eh? See. See, I have placed before you. It could have a different translation, but I'm just reading it from here. See, I'm giving you today a blessing and a curse. What is it talking about? So he's really Moshe Rabbeinu, as we know, just to take a little step back. This is Moshe Rabbeinu. The entire book of Deuteronomy is Moshe Rabbeinu's farewell speech that took about, how many days did it take? Anybody know? How many days did it take for him to say his farewell speech? What? Close. 36. Right, the 37th day, he was told, as soon as you go ahead and finish that war, you're going. And he said, Hashem, I really got to go over a lot of details and go over some things before I leave. Okay, you got permission, go for it. He assembled the people every single day for 36 days, and he gave over this speech. Now, a lot of people who learn ethics, ethical works, teachings such as called Path of the Just, Ways of the Righteous, they know that this book is meant to be a book on ethics, as a matter of fact. This is like the greatest book of ethics that people study. It teaches us a lot about ourselves, and it's coming from Moshe. This is Moshe's Musar. You ever heard of the word Musar before? It's his Musar work, okay? So he says, see, I am giving you today a blessing and a curse. This is in his speech, and he's alluding to something that's an event that he's going to give them a directive to do when they enter the land of Israel. The blessing, which is being given on the basis that you will listen to the commandments of God, your God, which I'm commanding you today. And the curse will come if you do not listen to the commandments of God, your God, and you go astray from the way which I commanded you today to follow other gods which are unacquainted to you. And basically this is a hint that he says, that actually in the next verses, that you're going to go into Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, and you're going to stand basically where there's two mountains, Har Eval, Mount Eval, and Mount Gerizim. You're going to have 6 tribes on one mountain and 6 tribes on the other, all facing the valley of the mountain. The tribe of Levi will be down there, and they're going to do this kind of interesting ceremony where they're going to say to one mountain these curses, and everybody will say Amen. And then they'll say the opposite form of these curses, the blessings, and everybody says Amen. But here he's only alluding to it, not giving the details of it. The interesting thing is that all of the Hasidic masters note if you look exactly at the language there, see that I have placed before you today blessing and curse. There's lots to say about blessing. There's lots to say about curse. But they wanted to focus on this one thing which is called before you. I have placed before you blessing and curse. So, meaning before you guys have a blessing and a curse. For me, God says, it's not that way. So in the language of Rav Nassan here, he brings, actually it's from Rabbi Rab Nachman, actually himself, his language. Blessings and curses are made to man according to the vessel that he has in him. In Kabbalistic tradition, everything is based on what's called light and vessel. Just like you'll have a cup and you'll have what goes inside the cup. Everything is based on light and vessel. As a matter of fact, basically we understand all of creation is based on that, because we got to take a step back and you always got to ask yourself, and all of my students know this. This is Judaism 101. What is the purpose of creation? Does anybody know? Come on, guys. I guess none of you guys listen to any of my classes in the past, huh?
Drawing down.
To bestow pleasure.
Right.
2 words. Bestow pleasure. God willed to bestow pleasure. When it went up on God's mind to bestow pleasure, instantly had to be recreated a vessel to receive that pleasure. Now, the ultimate giving and the ultimate receiving has to be done, which we call, it has to be earned. It has to be self-earned. This is the great principle that we have in tradition called the nama de ksufa, which is called the bread of shame. Which is is basically, the imagery is a poor man who receives every day from the rich man cannot look into the face of the rich man, because he's not giving anything back. So going back to this idea, God made a creation. He willed to bestow pleasure. Instantly was created a vehicle to receive that pleasure. Let's look at it as the universal soul that all of us come from. So here is this universal soul that was receiving all this unbelievable pleasure, and then what happens is this universal soul turns back to God and says, I don't want it. And God goes, what are you talking about? And this soul says, I can't do this anymore. Just be receiving and receiving and receiving. And you made me in your image. And your image is only giving. I want to give something back. I can't take it anymore. And so God says, okay, I will make a world. I will hide myself in that world. And I will put you down there. And through the powers of your free choice, you will choose the pleasure that I'm going to give you. Hence came this world, the world that we're in right now. So in a sense, just to cut to the chase a little bit, we are all vessels in process, okay? In other words, everything in Kabbalah that I could define in 1 foot, is going from an unrefined vessel to a refined vessel. We all start off in whatever level we're in, wherever we came from, whatever lifetimes we've gone through, as an unrefined vessel. And we are working towards being a refined vessel. So now, what does it mean? What are we talking about here, Rabbi? What does that have to do with this Parsha? So, God is just God. The light is just the light. God just knows how to give, and it's one simple light. When it goes into the vessel, if the vessel is an unrefined vessel that is not worthy of this light, what happens? It comes out not a blessing. Okay? But if, of course, the vessel is more refined and then can receive the light, so then everything works fine, and it's a blessing. the blessing and the curse aspect, that's why it says, I have placed before you, you guys have this duality going on. You guys have blessing or curse. Because why? You're fluctuating all the time. You guys, some periods of time, you're not doing the best that you can. You're not operating on a higher frequency level, higher vibration, higher thoughts. You're, maybe you're dragging your behind through life. So then things happen, and they don't seem like they're good. We'll call those curses. Okay? And then, of course, when the flow is the flow, and then we call that a blessing. But really, it's before you. I am Hashem. I do not change. I'm just light. And the biggest example is in the 10 plagues. When the Jewish people were going through the 10 plagues, it's known that they were receiving a revelation while the Egyptians were suffering from a plague. Whether it was the locust, the darkness, whatever it is, the Jewish people had a revelation of one of the 10 statements in creation. There's 10 places where it says, and God said, and God said, and God said. And each one of those is an unbelievable revelation, an unbelievable pocket, an unbelievable insight. God was just God. The Egyptians were on a crude level. Their vessels were unrefined and came out locusts, blood, hail, whatever. But meanwhile, the Jews, who were a vessel, were getting an unbelievable insight into reality, into existence, and into their mission, and into what they have to do. So really, the blessing and the curse is before us, and it really comes due to our level of our vessel that we're on. Okay? So now the question really is, okay, great, I got it, Rabbi. Unbelievable. All I got to do is work on refining my vessel. Because if things are not going right in my day or in my life, it must be I'm just not able to receive this. Because really, when it comes down to it like this, another little issue here to bring up is the Targum Yonasan. There are many Aramaic translations of the 5 books of Moses. One of them is Targum Yonasan, who is in the land of Israel. And he translates the word curse to be chiluf. Chiluf is an interesting word. Chiluf actually literally means switched, inverted. Meaning the light that came is inverted light. It's light. It just got switched. The Baal Shem Tov also brings this down. God only wants to give. But when whatever the force, the energy, the blessing that he wants to give is on its way down here. So there's called a force of din. There's a force of judgment in the world which says, well, wait a minute, this person is not worthy of this. So then what happens is that situation, that light, that energy has to switch and come down in a way that doesn't look like a blessing. I don't see how this is a blessing. But of course, what it is in the end of days, finally, like I spoke about last time, the 42 journeys that we were on, right? Those 42 journeys Hashem's going to show you, each one was unbelievable. And each one you're going to thank God for. It was a blessing. We can't see it now. We're so limited. So really the only force that we really need right now, the main force that we need, we learned that in last week's Parsha, is the force of the ankle. Force of the ankle? What are you talking about? Right? What are you talking about, Rabbi? The force of the ankle. Really, if you look in last week's Parsha, was V'haya Akev Tishma'un. Did you speak anything about that last week? The heel. If the heel will hear. What does it mean the heel will hear? Right? No, V'haya actually is a word for joy. Akev is heel and hear. When the heel, actually there'll be joy when the heel will hear. It's like a tongue twister. I got to say it real slow because otherwise I'll mess up. And the heel, of course, represents basically humanity. The heel has no senses really of its own. It doesn't see, it doesn't have eyes, it doesn't have ears. And it really represents the last generation before the Messiah comes. The head of the earlier generations, they had the hearing, they had the seeing, they saw the miracles, right? And then the later generations, which represents like the torso of humanity in history, they still had an internal where the heart resides, where there was a deeper sense, a deep sense of understanding, right? But the heel, nothing. Nothing except for one force and one force only. And that's the force of Emunah. That's it. That's the only power that we have. And God is so rejoicing when we use that power of Emunah. It makes the heavens are dancing. That's the only force we got. And that's what we got to use. And when we're in the heels of existence, and that's what we are in, that's what we have. So now getting back to refining our vessel, because that's really the point here. Okay? How do we refine our vessel? So this Parsha is going to give us some clues, some insights, some advice on how we can work on refining our vessel. Okay? And if you look at the Parsha, at the beginning of the Parsha, I just noticed a tremendous emphasis on meat, on sacrifices and meat. Okay? So if you look, it brings down in the very beginning, of course, after it mentions this ceremony about blessings and curses that's going to exist in the land of Israel, you're going to cross over, you got to take possessions. The first directive is you got to get rid of all the schmutz in the land. Schmutz, does everybody know what the word schmutz means? It's in that Webster dictionary. I wonder. Let's go look it up. Schmutz means garbage, right? Meaning the idolatry. You got to get rid of all the idolatries, all the trees. You got to burn the trees. You got to knock down all their altars. You got to eradicate all idolatry from the land. Okay? And then, of course, all the places where they would sacrifice, okay, but we can't do that in terms of when it comes to us, in terms of our relationship to God, as it says in chapter 12, verse 4, you shall not do any act of sacrificial worship to God, your God, other than the site where your God will choose. Right? In other words, you're not going to be able to sacrifice to any other places. God says, okay, you're going to sacrifice in the place where I'm going to tell you. There's going to be one place. He didn't want to tell us. He didn't say Jerusalem, right? He wanted to save it for the right time, where it would be revealed what that place where the temple was going to be. There was a place before that called Shiloh, where the tabernacle stood, right, for hundreds of years. And then there's this directive of, listen, sacrifices that are obligatory, that you have to do, you're not going to be able to do them in your house anymore. They used to have a situation where they had backyard altars, right? You'd build what they call a bama, right? It's a very hard word for me to relate because I come from California. Everything was a bama, right? See, I have created for you today the blessing and the bama.
I thought you said Obama.
I think that kind of might go. Okay. They call them bamas.
I'll leave now.
I'm trying to divert. Please help me, Hashem. Focus, refocus, focus, please, Hashem. Okay. So they did have, for a period of time, while the tabernacle was at Shiloh, obligatory sacrifices still needed to be brought there. But let's say if they wanted to do their own voluntary sacrifices, they can do them in their backyard altar, right? So those can be done, right? And then, so there's a lot going on in terms of sacrifices, right? And then it gets to, if you look on ahead, right, in verse 15. Actually, let's go a little bit before that. Verse 7, okay? If you look at verse 7, here comes an insight, okay? Verse 7 says, over there in that place that we're going to choose, it's going to be the place. There you're going to go ahead and bring all your sacrifices. Ve'achaltem sham, and you're going to eat there, lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, before God. Usmachtem b'kol mishlach yedechem, and you will be happy there. You will rejoice in all of the work of your hands. In all of the work of your hands, which God has blessed you. Okay? So here's an interesting insight that Rav Nassan brings down into developing our vessel. And this has to do with holy eating. Okay? And it goes kind of back a bit. And then how we participate in eating. Okay? That we call them, it's fascinating actually. The reason why they call them the 7 Noahide laws, when actually 6 of them were given to Adam. Only the 7th was given to Noah. And which one was that? You cannot eat torn flesh from a living animal. Okay? Now why was that delayed, so to speak?
Nobody ate it.
Why not? Because they were all vegan from California.
Chef said you could have every green herb from the garden.
Why were they, they're only into vegetarian? It's like, meat? Oh, disgusting, right? What happened? They weren't Texan, that's for sure.
The flood took away vegetation.
Noah was a Texan. He came out of the ark and goes, there's my barbecue. First thing he did was barbecue. We're going to smoke something. But what about the vineyard? Forget the vineyard. We're going to go barbecue right now. So why was it delayed until Noah? Anybody know?
Because the flood took care of all the vegetation.
Oh, there was nothing else to eat. What are we going to eat around?
It's just like a creepy
Okay. It's an amazing thing. It gets into a very huge principle in terms of what our goal is here. So, part of the structure of creation and how it worked since the tree, Adam ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. There was a how things were running before versus after things changed. Okay? And that really the purpose is, and part of that, to go back to that original thought of creation, that God made a world, He hid Himself in the world, and He put our souls down there in order for us to make the right choices, to earn the great, beautiful blessing that God is going to give us, which is really Himself, because there's nobody greater than Him. Yes, we're here to experience God. That's the ultimate good. But it has to be earned. How do we earn it? What is it? Okay? So we earn it through the deeds that He told us to do. But in a more deeper sense of what's happening here is we have to elevate things. Everybody has to elevate things. Okay? What do you mean? What do you mean? How do you elevate things, right? So the simplest, easiest, the most basic way that we elevate things, is eating. Because when you eat something, let's go simple here. You eat a plant, right? An apple, okay? What happens is that apple gets ingested into your system and goes into your blood and becomes part of your blood and becomes part of you. And so whatever you do with the force of the energy force of that apple, right? That apple is going to get elevated. Hopefully you'll do something good with it. Hopefully you'll make some good choices with it, right? And then by you doing that, you eating that, ingesting that food, you have elevated the apple. But it's more deeper than that. It's so deep, okay? Because it goes in our tradition that there are souls in all of matter. There are souls in food. Some souls are oppressed souls, that they did some things in previous lifetimes that they had to get sent into different objects for some reason. But before we get into that a little bit, just look at it basically, simply. You have mineral, plant, animal, and man. Okay, man is the speaker. You have, right? You have 4 basic levels, okay, of existence, of things that are material in the world, right? So minerals, we eat minerals, salt, pepper. Not pepper is a plant, but salt, let's say it's mind, right? Salt's a good one. I'll stick with salt, okay? I don't know anything else. A lot of things. Hydrochloric acid, that's right. Okay, so in any case, anytime we ingest any one of these things, we elevate it. Anytime you eat a plant, you elevate it. Animals, when the way the creation was set up, the system until Noah came, animals, the level of soul of all the animals were already elevated. They were on the plane of existence that they needed to be on. They were set. Everything was good. It was good. Okay? They didn't need to be elevated. We came down here with our powers of free choice. We partake of different things and items, and we use, even in the chairs and the walls, we're all elevating the holy sparks that are in every single thing in existence every moment. The car that you drive, the clothes that you wear. The Baal Shem Tov brings down the reason why clothes wear out is because you've elevated all the sparks in them. And then you go ahead and give it to Goodwill for someone else to elevate the part of the sparks that he has to elevate. It's not science wears out the shirt. It's, there's no more sparks to elevate. Car breaks down. Okay, you're done. No more sparks to elevate in that, right? It's all about elevating the sparks. And when the sparks are all used up and you've elevated why do some people like coffee and some people hate tuna fish? I have no sparks to elevate in tuna fish at all, forever. Okay? Coffee, I have a natural desire. I like coffee. So it must be I have sparks that I elevate when I drink the coffee. Okay? So every single thing in existence, the mineral, the plant, they needed to be elevated. That was where God gave us your portion to be a co-partner in creation, that when you partake of these things and elevate them with the kavanah, with the intention in mind, you're going to use it for a holy purpose, for a good purpose, to elevate humanity and make the world a great place. So then you elevate those things. Animals didn't need to until Adam sinned out of the Garden of Eden. And then what happened is all the way until the flood, where we saw what happened during the flood, that the animals had thwarted that. Even the animals were marrying males, right? That was going on at the time of the flood, right? Are you going to the wedding tonight? A sheep is marrying a cow, right? Did you? Farmer Brown's sheep is. So the chuppah is at 8. Okay, so therefore, the animals, after Noah came out of the ark, needed to be elevated. And then came the mitzvah, when Noah came out of the ark, of you cannot eat the flesh torn from a living animal. That everybody in humanity has this. Okay? Now, why? It's so unbelievable. Okay? But first, let's just get a little bit of background in terms of eating and elevating and the basic eating. Okay, that is going to refine us and make us into a refined vessel. Okay, so Rav Nassan says in this verse, and then you will be happy with every single thing that was sent to you. And every single thing in the world, this is Rav Nassan's language here, is mixed because of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the effect of that. So it became mixed, what we call the ruach ha'adam, the spirit of the man, which is called a holy dot, a dot of holiness, a mind, a consciousness of sanctity, okay? That became mixed with the spirit of the animal. And listen to this. This is where you get those Reb Nachman twists, where you're like thrown off a cliff, which is the aspect of the koach hamadame, the imagination. In other words, he associates the animal spirit with the imagination of a person. Go figure. Okay? Now, I tried to investigate this, and I'm not saying I have it down totally. Okay? What the imagination should be a good thing. I was raised on Barney. What are you talking about, Rabbi? Right? The imagination is where is really mixed up ever since we lost prophecy. Okay? The prophets, at that period of time, they were able to use that faculty was when it was in its fixed state, were able to it played a role in terms of helping them to intuit and interpret what God, his message is. Now, but since then, in the destruction of the temple, the force of imagination, we can definitely easily say, is messed up. Okay? And therefore, he associates with the force, an animal force that is within man. Because, I asked somebody this, and like how can it be that the koach medame, because, you could use imagination for really unbelievable things, and it's true, you can. The problem is how to define that line and where to put it in its right perspective. But usually the force of an animal, let's say, an animal even thinks also it can do things that it really can't do. Okay? Many animals can think that they can do things like, dogs can jump from a roof. They think they could fly. Or a lot of animals think that they don't really have a total concept of who they are. Sometimes, right? Where are my eggs, right? Or whatever. Like I know my aunt used to feed her pet scrambled eggs and sausage in the morning. So in any case, he associates the spirit of the animal. So anyways, ever since, in every single thing is mixed these two forces, spirit of man and spirit of animal. That there, from that force of the imagination actually is drawn all of the physical desires, the animal desires. And this is the Iker Tikkun of eating in holiness. In order to separate, we want to purify, to separate through using the seichel, the intellect, the spirit of man aspect. We want to separate it from the animal aspect. Listen, this is a huge Kabbalistic principle called Melechet HaBirur, the act of separation. In other words, really, separating, we all have to do it. We do it all the time. Every single day, all day long, we're separating things in our minds, or whether it's physical, right? And when, if you're taking meat from a bone, is a simple act of separation. Taking out bad things from good things is a simple act of separation, all the time. Separation is something even your body basically does on a very basic animalistic level. You eat food, it takes what's good, and then you dispose of the waste. It's always being done. The idea here is to do it from a higher perspective and not allow just nature to take its course, but for us, when we interact with food, to have actually this kind of understanding or this kind of awareness that we're actually going to get a higher level of consciousness through eating. Okay? Would you believe it? Because most people, I got to tell you a story. It's a great story. Baal Shem Tov, sitting in a tavern with his students around. And he says, I want to show you guys something. Some people can eat in holiness, and they have in mind that when they're eating, they're going to elevate the holy sparks in the food. And some people, well, they're just not there. They're just in a different place. I want you to now, very slowly, take a look at the man behind me, sitting at the table there, right, at 6 o'clock. Take a look at him. And they turn and they look at him, and they all got shocked, because they all can swear to you that they saw a cow with a strimel. Do you know what a strimel is? Eating food. Sitting at the table, the cow is sitting there chomping down food, right? With a strimel. And they even can swear to you that it went moo to them. And they turn around and they go, you see, it's all where the mind is. Where is your mind? Is your mind on eat, feed me? Or is your mind at something else? I'm going to now elevate the holy sparks that are in this food. And he says, now look again. And they look again, and it was a person. But he wanted to show them that if your mind is not in the right place, and then it's just an animalistic act of eating. You're no different than the cows. But if you apply your intellect to what you're doing, and it takes concentration, folks. I'm just introducing to you this concept. Anybody ever heard of this concept before? Okay. So this work of separation is affecting when we're eating. We're separating the Adam spirit, the spirit of man, the intellect, from the animalistic spirit. When we're doing this, just with that thought, okay? To separate the good from the bad, which is the aspect of the imagination. We're fixing our imagination through eating. Wild. And now how does this effective? How does this do it? Because how does he bring it from the verse? And he says this essential work of separating is through joy. You have to master joy. You have to be able to eat with joy. Joy is it. You have to eat b'simcha. That is how this work is separated. That's what distinguishes us between animals. Yes, animals are also happy, but what are we happy about and what are they happy about? Yeah, animals are very happy when they're eating, okay? We have a different happiness. We celebrate differently. And therefore, he says, a person needs to eat with joy. You can't eat when you're angry, and you shouldn't eat when you're depressed. Has anybody ever eaten when they're angry and depressed? Is the food digested well? I can't remember, right? Just like what it says, Lech echol b'simcha lachmecha, go and eat your bread with joy. That the essential work, the essential rectification and the separating of food is through joy. Now you have to master joy. And there's 6 steps, there's 6 key elements in having joy, mastering simcha. First one is just to be grateful, and that's an easy one. Just to think about all the things you could be grateful for when you're eating. I mean, you could be grateful for the food, for sure, right? And then there's so much other things you could be grateful for. When a person is grateful, they instantly become happy. Another technique of joy is just being in the present, because usually when people, they're never there, right? Some people's minds are always in the past, or always in the future. If you're in the present and you're eating in front of a shulchan, a table, right? In God's presence, there's nothing more holier. And you're eating this in holiness in order to serve God with joy and greater joy. So the real technique is to have joy when you're eating. And through this, you fix actually the imagination. Bizarre, isn't it? And this is the aspect of sacrifices, Rav Nassan says. The aspect of sacrifices? Yeah. Because then, at the time of the sacrifices in the Holy Temple, the tribe of Levi, what were they doing? Right? They were singing. Actually, there's this menatzchim b'shir. They were conquering with song. That's the language that he uses. That they would be singing these unbelievable songs in the time of the offering of the korban. That the essential korban is really to separate the spirit of man, which is the good spirit, from the ruach habehema, from the spirit of the animal. And this is done by way of also singing and negina. Okay? So it's also good. That's why people on the Shabbos table will also sing songs. There's lots more to it, to go into it. I want to go into it now. Okay? And there's other places where we say that there's no other greater joy than meat, right? Than basar behema shemavin mimenu korbanot. Ein simcha ela. There's no joy except with the flesh of an animal that a person brings korbanot. That there is the essential aspect of joy. That the essential aspect of separating the animal part is through this singing and joy. All right? So here we have first stage. Every time we approach food, right, is we have to stop. Y'all say blessings? Do people say blessings? Right?
Yes.
You should definitely say blessings. Okay? Blessings before, after, right? Grace after meals is also amazing one of the ways to elevate food. I'm going to throw this out, and you don't have to practice this. Don't think I'm just going to give you information, okay? But the Ben Ish Chai, he was the Sephardic rabbi, lived in the late 1800s, 1900s in Baghdad. He was the head Sephardic rabbi, a big Kabbalist. In his law book, he says, when you're eating a meal, and you'll eat the bones, you got to leave the bones on the table when you bless. You got to leave the bones and the peels, and you got to leave all the finished stuff. That usually my wife, she goes crazy. I wanted to do it once, and she went nuts. No, I can't stand a dirty table, right? So you cover it. The Ben Ish Chai says, you can cover it when you bless, because when you're blessing, the energy of the blessing that you're doing, you're elevating the sparks that are in those bones or in the peels or whatever it is. And then you can clear the table after you bless. Okay? Like I say, don't try this at home, folks, especially if your wife's a neat freak. Okay? So going on now into the Parsha, still continuing on the meat element. Okay? So once again, here we're heading towards refining our vessel, and we're doing it through eating is refining, and more specifically through meat. Okay? Because meat is a high level of elevation. And what are we doing when we're eating meat? So if you go on later on in the Parsha, right? It speaks about, okay, in verse 20, okay? I think it's the same chapter. Chapter 12, verse 20. It says, when God your God extends your boundary, as he said to you, and say, I want to eat meat, because your soul desires to eat meat, and then you may eat as much meat as your soul desires. I mean, a little infatuation with meat here, right? And you know why you have a desire for meat is because you have holy sparks that are in there that need to be elevated. Okay? If you don't have a desire for meat, it's okay. You don't have to. Okay? Even though they do recommend, even for vegetarians, on Shabbat, to eat meat. Okay? Even a little piece. Because you're elevating the sparks that are in there. So now Rav Nassan is going to, okay, let's go on just a little bit more. Okay? Skip to verse 23. However, be strong not to eat the blood, for the blood is the soul, and you may not eat the soul with the flesh. Okay? Once again, Jewish tradition holds that the life force of an animal or any living being is in the blood. And we're not supposed to be eating the blood. Okay? That's why we slaughter the way we do. And here's the laws of slaughtering are in this parsha. We're going to go into a different zone here. The Rav Nassan says, "V'lo tochal nefesh im basar." You cannot eat the nefesh with the meat. What is he talking about? Okay? What's the problem? What's the big deal? Right? So he says here, this is the aspect of the prohibition of flesh torn from a living animal. And he's going to explain it in a very deep way. And really what comes out of this, halacha lahalacha, I cannot tell you. But it's very, we'd have to ask Rav Nassan what he's going to say when we go through this. He says, first of all, right, we know that where ritual slaughtering occurs, right? Ritual slaughtering is in the neck. Why the neck? So the neck really, of course, here he says the slaughtering really is to subdue the animal force and to elevate the nefesh from chai to medaber. In other words, like I said before, you have mineral, plant, animal, which is called chai, and then you have speaking. 4 levels. We're trying to elevate all of them, okay? We're trying to extend ourselves to other sparks, and even the sparks that are part of us, that give us completion, are in every single thing that we use. More specifically here, food, okay? So the slaughtering what do we need to do? Why do we need to slaughter it there? Okay. So you'll say simply that the reason why we slaughter there is because we need to drain the blood the fastest. Because if you drain the blood the fastest, you drain the life force the fastest. And that's what we need to do. But it has to be specifically the neck. Okay, isn't there any other place where you can drain the life force the fastest? And basically, maybe science will say no. Okay, but here we have a different reason. Okay, what do we want to do? We want to subdue the animalistic force, and we want to elevate the soul from the stage of chai, of animal, living, to speaking. We're involved in elevating souls here. And therefore, a person needs to slaughter from the neck specifically. That is, the windpipe, food pipe, and the main arteries that are there. Because they are really next to what we call the mouth. Okay? That the mouth, it's the closest thing to the mouth. It really has to do with the mouth, because it's speaking. Now, an animal can't speak. Therefore, the rectification of slaughtering is specifically in those areas. You have to slaughter, when they slaughter with a knife this big, depending upon if it's a goat, this big, cow this big, chicken this big. They go with a nail over the blade to make sure there's no nicks, okay? And therefore, the rectification of shechita is through these three vehicles, the windpipe, food pipe, and arteries, because that's where the souls, and he uses the plural, the souls go out from the aspect of nafshi yatsa bedabro. It's an interesting word in Shir Shirim, which literally translates, my soul goes out with his word. Okay? But here the connection is the soul, nefesh, yatsa, goes out bedabro, with speaking, with his speaking. In other words, with the place of speech. And therefore, there gathers all of the blood in the time of this slaughtering, that there is the place where the soul goes out. That the blood, we say, is the soul, and the going and the elevating of the souls is through there. And therefore, because there is the essential soul, so we have to say that's where the essential life force exists. And because of this, though, we have something else that exists there. Something else that maybe you've heard this phrase before, the klipa. Anybody ever heard of klipa before? Klipa is a husk, a shell. It's an obstacle. It's a blockage. It's the husk that's in front of an orange that surrounds an orange. You have to break it in order to get to the fruit. They're there for a reason. They protect. But then again, they're not the essence. But people can get deluded in this world to think that those external things, it could be activities. Activities could be a klipa, you know? I found that out when I got hooked into Tetris when I was in yeshiva, right? Tetris, the falling blocks, right? It's just a harmless game, falling blocks, right? But the problem is you can spend hours doing it, right? And then I go to pray, I go to services to pray, I close my eyes, and I see falling blocks. That was it. I quit. No more Tetris for me. So even though it seems like a harmless thing for some people, it could be useful. There are 4 different types of klipot, of these husks. 3 are evil completely. 1 is noga, has good and bad in it, right? Like the computer, home computer. You can draw the most unbelievable Torah insights and knowledge from it, but meanwhile, in another direction, a person could go to the worst of places. It's all there. Parv. It's like in between. So in any case, there's 3 klipot that exist by the neck, Rav Nassan says, and those are called the windpipe, food pipe, and the arteries. There actually has a nickname for them. They're called the 3 ministers of Paro. The 3 ministers of Paro. Paro was the one who's is actually, if you change the letters of Paro, it means orif, which means neck, back of neck. Paro is the one who wants to, and then the klipa is job also, very much like a parasite. It wants to suck the juices, okay? Just enough, we want to give it, We don't want to destroy the klipa. Till Mashiach comes, we cannot destroy the klipa completely. Okay? It needs a little bit, okay, of juice. But it doesn't need a lot of juice. Okay? So paro is the back of the neck. He's waiting for the blood. When the blood comes, the rush of the blood or the insides, he's right there at the neck. And the neck is a narrow place where he can go ahead and plug in and suck out all that energy. So the same place, these three ministers of paro are existing at the neck. And they stand there. And they want to suckle from the dibur and the nefesh, from that soul that goes there. It's always there. So more specifically, in an animal, you see, because an animal, the problem is, in many cases, we say that the soul of an animal is an oppressed soul. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Yes, there's lots to talk about oppressed souls. Lots to talk about. But sometimes you'll have a soul that was a speaking soul at one time. It was a human. It was a person that spoke. And then what happens is it did something. Maybe it spoke Lashon Hara, spoke bad. And then what happened is an element of that soul, and in the next lifetime, gets reincarnated into an animal. And then it can't speak. Animals can't speak. They can make sounds, but they can't speak. So what happens is, I'm just going to cut it short here a little bit, okay? That what happens is when a person slaughters in that place, so then he releases the soul from those klipa, and he actually gets involved in elevating that soul, and he brings it back. It's on the way to being brought back from its low level of speaking, from its low level of where it couldn't speak, to now it can return to its place of speaking. But now, why does that have to do with Aver Menachai? Okay? So therefore, he says here, all the time that an animal is not slaughtered from the neck, right? Even if you would cut a limb from it, what happens if you cut a limb from it? Not even necessarily willfully. I was looking at this book, like, where's Aver Menachai these days? Like, is anybody selling Aver Menachai meat online? Is there a website for it? No. But let's say a person there's a roadkill, an accident, right? What do you call it? Deer in the headlights, right? And a limb falls off the animal. It's meat. You could eat it, right? But it's a limb off the animal. You put it in the freezer, you eat it another time. No, you cannot eat that. That is called the limb torn from a living animal. You didn't do it willfully. It happened, right? But still, something happens. If the animal wasn't slaughtered properly, what happens is, like we'll know in nature, an animal gets pretty stressed in a situation such as that, or any situation in a slaughterhouse, I believe. I don't know, I haven't interviewed any animals, right, in line, right? It would be a nice one, go interview them, right? I'm pretty stressed here, I see what's going on, 3 animals above me. They're shooting it with a nail gun. I'm pretty stressed. So, but obviously what happens is the muscles lock. The blood locks in. And then therefore, if the blood locks in, the nefesh gets locked in. So therefore, that nefesh, which really is a reincarnated soul that needs to be elevated to a higher level of speaking, is now sucked in to a different place. And his language is like this, okay? Even if you would cut a piece of its limb with a knife, so the force of the animal, the animalistic force, is not bent, is not subdued. The soul does not go out through there. Because the way of the going out of the soul is only through the neck, only through those three places: windpipe, food pipe, and arteries. In the aspect of nafshi yatsa b'dabro, the soul goes out in the place of speaking. And there we say the klipot, the forces, the external forces are subdued there and only there. That there is where they're grabbing. There is where they're getting their chiyut, and that is where the life of the soul is existing. And therefore, therefore, when a person were to eat flesh torn from a living animal, he is eating the nefesh with the basar. He is eating the soul with the meat. That it still remains in it, and therefore its life force is still there. Kikol aver, because each and every limb draws to itself that element of life, that life force, and the life force and the souls don't go out through the limbs, only through the place of the shechita. That's why I'm inclined to say, maybe, I don't know what Bnei Noach eat in terms of meat. I don't know the halacha. I believe the halacha is you could eat anything. Correct or not correct?
Eat anything that's quote unquote biblically kosher, but does not have to be halakhically kosher.
Okay, but what is biblically kosher?
Eating no shellfish, things
That kind of things. But what about a slaughtered animal, even though it's not kosher slaughtered? You don't have to buy kosher meat.
This is where we're actually having rabbis having to dive into the halakha of this for Bnei Noach. And the reason why is blood is going to remain in the meat. The whole idea is if it's not kosher butchered, how can you be reassured the blood is out of meat?
So what about halal?
I don't believe that.
It's not slaughtered through the neck?
It is slaughtered through the neck. But the problem is they say certain blessings, brachas over it that I'm not sure that we would be allowed to as non.
Because you don't serve their Allah?
No, I mean, I don't know.
I don't even know they say blessings.
Oh, yeah, they most definitely. That's part of the slaughter ritual.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, but anyways, but it is through the neck, according to Rav Nassan. Let me just finish here. Ki derech sham mitavet hanefesh, let's say, is because the soul wants to go out through the neck, because that's the place of speaking. It wants to become elevated, to become a speaking entity again. It's dying. It's stuck in an animal for who knows how long, wanting to get out, to be a speaking individual again, to be reborn into a speaking individual. It can't while it's there. Then it could be speaking when it goes out. But when you cut a limb from it in another place, then the other opposite happens. The limb pulls to itself the life force, and the life force is the nefesh which remains in it, and it doesn't go out from there. And therefore, the Torah forbid, just like it says, Lo tochal nefesh ima basar, don't eat the flesh, don't eat the soul with the meat. Kein habasar nichshar. V'nitar ba'achila rak achar yetzias nefesh mimenu. Because the flesh is not kosher until the nefesh has gone out from it. Aval nefesh bi'atzma, but the nefesh itself, asur lekalaso la'achla, it's forbidden to eat it or to finish it. Nimsa, Rav Nassan ends off with this. Kishiochel chas shalom ever min achai, when a person were to eat ever min achai, who wrote seach mamash. That's an astounding words. He is a murderer. Ki horeg et nefesh, because he has killed a soul, because he's caused him to be plunged into a lower depth. Okay, so I mean that's why I'm saying, whoa. Okay, so let's finish off. Okay, it's interesting to know why wouldn't halal. So what do they say? So what they believe in one God, the Ishmaelim.
I'm just not. I don't know. That's a mystery. That's something I have not gotten a decision on.
Okay, so I mean, okay, well, hopefully, seems according to Rav Nassan, I mean, there's either Ever Minachai or it's slaughtered at the neck. It doesn't have to be a ritually kosher slaughtered. It doesnn't have to be with the nicks and the all the.
Regular meat nowadays is drained pretty well, but I don't think.
I don't know. I don't know.
Is almost like destroying the liver of an animal.
It doesn't. I don't know. I don't know. That's we're gonna have to ask the big boys.
Let me ask you, did you hear a midrashim on Joseph and his brothers having to do with them eating an animal that had been destroyed, but not kosher, not a proper kosher, and this is why he went back.
Ben Pakua, you mean when he spoke bad about his brothers?
Exactly.
Well, that was because they slaughtered a cow, and if the mother's pregnant with a calf inside, they open up that stomach, and there's a calf that pops out alive. That does not need a slaughtering. You'll have to kill it. You cannot eat it live. But-
So he's going back to tell his father, hey, we're supposed to do this differently. We can't do it like Noah did.
Right.
Right?
Right. That was a big argument. Right.
There's some argument in there.
There was an argument. They held that they were Bnei Israel. No, I think it's the opposite. He held they were Bnei Israel and can't eat it, and they held they were like the Bnei Noach.
Right.
So that was that discrepancy there.
It's a good discussion.
Yeah, it's a big one, especially since Australia, they're starting to farm Ben Pakuas.
Right.
Those animals, they're starting to
I
produce them.
Most B'nai Noach.
Ben Pakua is this calf that came out of the stomach of its mother. In other words, they slaughtered the mother cow, opened up the stomach, and out came a live calf.
They are doing this.
Now it's totally us. It's totally forbidden. No rabbi would permit it, but of course there's some renegades. You always got a bunch of them who want to make a business out of it because it doesn't need to be slaughtered. This animal does not need slaughtering. You could bump it on the head and eat it because it was already technically a part of the mother when it was slaughtered. You understand? So it's just a piece of meat. It happens to be living, but it's just a piece of meat from the mother because you slaughtered the mother. And everything in it, the mother, is part of the mother. It happens to be you took this piece out. It's alive. Now you can eat it without...
I've never heard that.
Yeah. Go check it online. It's whatever. In any case here, we're getting into Rosh Hashanah. Let's go back. Let's focus, okay? We're getting into Rosh Hashanah, chevre. We're getting into Rosh Hashanah. We're again coming into the new year. And we're learning here that we're here to refine our vessels. One of the great ways that God gave us, thank you, God, you gave us great opportunities, right? How we can refine ourselves. And we refine ourselves through eating, okay? And when we eat things, and we partake of things, we have to have a certain mindset involved, okay? We have to have an elevated thoughts. And just the basic simple thoughts is, I'm eating this in order to be strong and healthy to serve God. Basic line, write it down. I'm eating this in order to be strong and healthy to worship God. That's it. When you're eating that, say that before you're eating and you're good to go, okay? So we're here because we're supposed to be separating, okay? We're involved in always separating, and we want to elevate ourselves, and we want to fix the koach, the animal force that is within us, and it has to be done with a separation. And that is done with joy, and joy has to be, of course, in the mind, in the thoughts, okay? And of course, not only that is involved in refining ourselves, but also the very things that we eat also have to go through this period or this stage of separating things, okay? In other words, you have to separate the nefesh. You have to make sure the food is the right kind of food that you're eating, because if a person is not eating the right kind of food, then it's going the opposite direction. So we should all have a blessing. We should all have a blessing that we have to focus when we eat. That we focus and we eat. We're refining our vessels. And we're becoming more spiritual every single time we partake of food. And we should become unbelievable vessels to receive the unbelievable light and unbelievable relationship and connection with the infinite. Say Amen.
Amen.
Any questions?